Courage, faith, and purpose for such a time as this. The story of Esther is a powerful reminder that God often works behind the scenes, even when his name is not spoken aloud. It is a story about courage rising from fear, obedience growing out of uncertainty, and purpose being revealed in the most unexpected circumstances. Esther did not begin her journey as a queen or a hero. She began as an orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai, living quietly in a foreign land. And yet, God had already written her into a story much bigger than she could imagine. Esther's life teaches us that our beginnings do not define our endings. She was not born into influence or power, but God placed her exactly where she needed to be. When Esther was chosen to become queen, it may have seemed like chance or coincidence, but faith teaches us that nothing is random in the hands of God. What looks like opportunity to the world is often positioning in the eyes of heaven. For a long time, Esther lived in the palace without revealing who she truly was. She carried her identity quietly, obedient to Mordecai's instruction. This season of silence was not wasted time, it was preparation. Many believers struggle with seasons where they feel hidden, overlooked, or unseen. But Esther reminds us that God often prepares his servants in silence before calling them into bold action. Not every season is meant for speaking, some are meant for becoming. The turning point in Esther's story comes when danger threatens God's people. A decree is issued that could lead to their destruction. Fear fills the air, and suddenly Esther is faced with a choice. She can remain silent and safe, or she can speak and risk everything. This moment reveals one of the most important truths of faith. Calling always requires courage. There comes a time when silence is no longer obedience. Mordecai's words to Esther echo through generations. Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? This question was not meant to pressure her, it was meant to awaken her. Esther's position was not given for comfort alone, but for responsibility. And the same is true for us. Wherever God has placed you, your family, your work, your influence, it is not accidental. You were there for a reason. Esther was afraid, and the Bible does not hide that fact. Courage does not mean the absence of fear, it means choosing obedience despite fear. Esther did not rush forward in her own strength. Instead, she turned first to prayer and fasting. She understood that human courage alone would not be enough. Before she spoke to the king, she humbled herself before God. This teaches us that spiritual battles must be approached with spiritual preparation. Prayer changed everything. Esther did not rely on strategy alone, she relied on God's favor, and when the moment came, she stepped forward with wisdom, patience, and faith. She did not accuse hastily or act emotionally, she trusted God's timing. True faith is not reckless, it is rooted in trust and guided by wisdom. God's hand is evident throughout Esther's story. Even when miracles are not loud or dramatic, there is no sea parting, no fire from heaven, yet deliverance comes. This reminds us that God does not always work through spectacle. Often, he works through timing, conversations, favor, and courage. The absence of visible miracles does not mean the absence of God. In the end, what was meant for destruction was turned into deliverance. What was meant to silence God's people became a testimony of his protection. Esther's obedience saved a nation, but it also transformed her. She entered the palace as a young woman shaped by fear and uncertainty, and she emerged as a leader shaped by faith and purpose. The story of Esther teaches us that obedience may be costly, but disobedience costs more. Esther risked her life, but silence would have cost her soul. When you choose to walk in God's purpose, you will face opposition, but you will never walk alone. God goes before those who trust him. Esther's life reminds us that God uses ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary plans. You do not need to be perfect, fearless, or fully prepared. You need to be willing. God is not waiting for you to feel ready. He is waiting for you to trust him. If you are in a season of waiting, remember Esther. If you are afraid to speak, remember Esther. If you feel hidden, uncertain, or unqualified, remember Esther. God has placed you where you are for a reason, and when the time comes, he will give you the strength to stand. Because sometimes, the very moment you are in right now is the moment God has been preparing you for all along, for such a time as this.